Writeopolis, we're not just gonna kid, it's Writeopolis, we're not just gonna kid, yeah. Welcome to Writeopolis, featuring authors RJ Barker, Scott K. Andrews and Kid Power, and, often, a guest. Writeopolis is recorded live via Discord on alternating Sunday evenings, a conversational show with audience participation, bark on without the BS. Funded entirely through the generosity of our Patreon backers. Patreon.com/Writeopolis podcast. Writeopolis, we're not just gonna kid, it's Writeopolis, we're not just gonna kid, yeah. Alright, we're dealing with live rounds now, so look out.
I promise that I'll be good. And I've brought my own swear jar.
I mean, that's, to be honest, that's the only reason we invited you on, because we really need the cash. So,
yeah. I've just opened my purse now and just pour it out.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's all in shrapnel though.
That's fine. It's all right. It doesn't matter. We just thought, bring on Priya, set up the swear jar, and then that'll cover the hosting costs for the next 12 months. So
brilliant, excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent.
There you go. Yeah. Well, it's early. Yeah, it's early. It's fine. We're gonna build up to these things. So wow. So I love this. The show started never mind RJ. You don't need me either. The show's running. It's fantastic.
Sorry, I'm always early for everything.
Yeah, no, it's great.
I get all set up in case I need some massive technological gaffe, despite you doing a little run through with me. And it all fell through when I saw that Katie Tree and Fiddles T. Brigham were messaging each other. So it's all sort of gone out the window. Is Scott online? Is Scott here?
Oh, it is. Well? I think Scott has just joined us. So yeah, people are still coming in. I mean, technically, it is 8:30. So I guess this is Writeopolis. Welcome everybody. I am not RJ Barker, as you can probably tell. No,
and I am not RJ Darker.
But we are joined by the absolutely fantastic multi-award-winning author Priya Sharma. Priya, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
You're hilarious. Thank you. It's lovely to be here. Thanks for inviting me. And it's lovely to meet Scott, because I don't know Scott.
Hello.
I've not seen the whites of your eyes yet, Scott. So one day, hopefully, we'll meet.
Hopefully. I'm going to be at FantasyCon this year.
Are you? I'm not 100% sure whether I'm going this year or not. It's still a little bit up in the air. I'm sort of perhaps maybe not, but it just depends on many things. But have you been to these before, Scott, or is this your first year, or are you
No, I've been to a few FantasyCons in the past, including one where I had a panic attack so bad that I went and hid in my hotel room for 24 hours and just watched the first season of Mr. Robot and refused to talk to anybody. But other than that,
I'm sorry, that's stressful.
It was my book. They were giving my book away free on the free books table, and nobody took any.
Oh no!
They literally could not give my book away. And after a day and a half of this, I was just like, everybody hates me, and I went and hid in my hotel room.
Now, if they could get mine first edition, they missed the chances. They missed the chances.
Right.
I'm going to say the fools.
But FantasyCon's lovely, and it was at FantasyCon where I first met Kit and RJ.
That's right. That's where this happened, actually.
Indeed.
It was obviously, because it was the three of us, it took us about 4 years to actually implement it, having come up with the idea. So wouldn't it be great if we could do this every 2 weeks online with people, sitting around in the bar at FCon, just making each other laugh? Wouldn't it be good if you could do this? That'd be really good. And mere. Exactly, yeah. A mere 4 years later, and I think we're 10 months into lockdown. RJ says, "Hey, you know what? Why don't we do that?" Oh, dearie me. Well, it's great to have you joining us. I guess we can start. It's just a bit odd because RJ normally leads it, so I'm completely at sea at the moment. But I guess we could start with what you've been watching, what you've been reading. That's probably a good place to start.
Yeah, I've got got a massive list of stuff. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I've had I had a period where I just, I fell into television quite heavily during lockdown, as I think many of us have had, which is proving the value of art and then some, I think, for the soul. I mean, in terms of what I was watching, I think last year, in the last 12 months, I think the things that I've really loved the most were The Serpent. I don't know if anyone else saw that, the BBC drama about the guy who killed a lot of backpackers in the Far East.
Yes.
Yeah, I haven't seen it
yes,
yet.
Indeed.
Yeah, I just loved that. I loved the way it was structured. I thought the performances were brilliant. Do you remember a film called, I think it was A Prophet, from about, 10 or 15 years ago? And the lead in that was Tahara Him, who played the lead in The Serpent. And he's just phenomenal, I think. So, I loved that. And I it wasn't graphic. There wasn't, I don't remember there being any graphic violence, but I remember there being real peril. There were times when I was just on the edge of my seat.
Yeah, I think the implied threat was really strong, because there wasn't what I thought was fascinating about the show structurally was there kind of really wasn't a mystery. You knew what they were from the beginning, and all of the tension therefore throughout whatever it was, the 6 parts came from precisely you're knowing what they are and no one else in their lives knowing what they are. And that it's really unbearable. Yeah,
loaded, didn't it? Every little action, every line was completely loaded right from the start.
Yeah.
So I loved that. And the terror as well.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Yes. I've actually, I did a separate podcast on that with my friend George Daniel Lee, fellow fantasy horror author, because we both. We speak fairly regularly. We do maybe sort of once a month, once every 6 weeks. We talk about something, and it's normally some kind of shared childhood experience thing, something that we grew up with that we really like. But we both, as soon as I tweeted out that I'd finished watching Terror, he was like, he just, bubbled up in my DMs. It was like, we have to talk about this. We have to talk about this right now. My goodness, what a phenomenal bit of television.
And it really captured the book as well. I remember reading the book some years ago and being amazed by how intricate and the sense of tension that it builds. It's a really long book, but it just grabs you and holds you all the way through, and the TV series really captured that.
I've not read it, Scott. Would you recommend it? I mean, now I've seen it, obviously it changes things somewhat, but would you recommend reading it?
Yeah, I loved it. I mean, Dan Simmons has recently become problematic, as so many authors of his generation have, but that is an absolutely terrific book.
I don't think you can take away from the quality of that story. And the performances were just amazing. I mean, stellar British cast.
Yeah, absolutely.
Big fan of Jared Harris after Chernobyl.
Yes.
Very much enjoyed that. I've come really late to the party with this, and we're into the second series of Mindhunter.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
So very. I don't know. It's one of those things that I really want to sort of go and scrub it off afterwards. Especially that the first series. Really quite. And it's funny because I think we're all pop psychologists now to watch the evolution of something like that. And things that perhaps to us would seem quite obvious. I think we're all pretty conversant in serial killers, aren't we? Just again, amazing. Pacing was really interesting as well.
And it sends you down a great Wikipedia wormhole. The primary case in the second season is particularly fascinating because of all the prejudices and blinkers that it reveals in this model they're creating. It's both the fictionalized version that you get in series 2 and when you go off and read about what really happened, it's particularly eye-opening.
Okay, interesting, because we're getting a sense of things grinding up to something now. Yeah. And Am I right in saying there's going to be a third one?
I
imagine that.
They stopped it because it was costing an awful lot of money, and he did stupid things like spend an entire day filming a car pulling up outside a prison because he wasn't content with where the guy on the prison wall was, and he kept moving him from one place to another. And so the cast and crew got a little bit tired of Fincher's perfickiness, but he did recently say he's starting to think maybe he should do a third series after all, so fingers crossed.
Yeah. And on sort of that note, actually, I watched the Netflix thing on Peter Sutcliffe, which was really interesting, about talking about prejudices and preconceptions, looking at each of the women that died, and how the language and the prejudices around women affected them actually catching Peter Sutcliffe. And I hadn't realised actually how just by chance it all was they actually got him. But yeah, it was interesting because, you know, each woman, you know, you learn each woman's story, and, you know, some of those women had become sex workers because they come from very difficult backgrounds, abused, domestic abuse. They kind of, the whole thing only really started to change when someone who wasn't a sex worker died.
Yeah.
So yeah, really, it was really sort of sobering viewing, actually. So yeah, I definitely recommend that. I mean, I think we're all similar ages, aren't we? And I think we all sort of have memories of that on news reports and things. But I didn't actually sort of know the ins and outs of what happened. So I thought it was well done. It was very well done.
I mean, the thing that's interesting to me about that for me is the common thread there between that and Mindhunter, because I was thinking as you were talking about Mindhunter, like, it's one of the things that fascinates for me is, like, I mean, not only are we all familiar with the principles of forensic psychology at this point, but I think, you know, increasingly we're aware that it's quite a contested field, one with quite a lot of limitations, quite a lot of potential failures, quite a lot of, you know, built-in prejudices. And it's interesting how the themes, certainly of season 2 of Mindhunter and that documentary you're talking about, actually are talking about that in the same way. It's about the limitations of a certain kind of investigative approach, and how it's always the untested assumptions that trip you up, right? Mm-hmm. You know, that's always where you're going to screw up. And of course, when that's, you know, when you're dealing with a situation where that's law enforcement and a serial killer, it's a lethal mistake to make. You know, it's literally a lethal mistake to make. But, yeah.
And there was a long article. I can't remember what publication it was in. Maybe the New Yorker, about 10 years ago.
Oh, Scott, fancy.
I remember. No, I found it online. Don't worry, I'm not picking up my copy of the New Yorker every day. I mean, I get my butler to iron it for me before I read it. And it was basically a psychologist deconstructing profiling and saying, "Hey, everybody, it's just a con trick." Mm-hmm. And I remember reading it and getting to the end of it and thinking, "Wow!" And so when you read a deconstruction of it, and then you read the people who say, "No, it's a science," it's hard to know how seriously to take it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely. And it's certainly the limitations of it have become apparent in a couple of pretty high-profile cases. It's really fascinating stuff. So, what have you been watching, Scott?
I just muted myself because I was going to go type and find that article, but then I had to unmute myself again. Hence the pregnant pause. What have I been watching? I finished Breaking Bad.
Nice.
And immediately,
no spoilers, please.
I've got to be careful. Kit is currently watching it and hasn't finished it. I thought it was astounding. I thought it was absolutely brilliant. I loved the ending. And we immediately watched El Camino, which, although it was filmed 10 years later, does segue straight off the finale and makes a terrific coda.
Interesting, because I've not seen El Camino.
It's really good. Yeah. The only problem is it is shot 10 years later, and one of the characters has put on an awful lot of weight, and they appear in flashbacks, and so you just have to convince yourself that this character put on and lost an enormous amount of weight in a very short space of time in order for the flashbacks to work within the timeline of the series. But it's terrific. It's very, very good. It works as a good coda. Yeah, I was amazed. I was amazed by it. I thought the ending was perfect. Nailing the ending on a show like that is so hard, and we've had endless conversations on here about which shows we think have and haven't nailed the ending, and Breaking Bad nailed it. I felt it was the ending I wanted.
Are you going to go on and watch Better Call Saul, do you think?
We've taken a break because Better Call Saul hasn't finished yet. We're going to wait until the final seasons come out. So we've diverted. We were trying to choose between Justified and The Shield.
Right.
And The Shield is only available at the moment on streaming in the old unremastered 4x3 version. So I went and ordered the Blu-ray, so I'm waiting for that to arrive. And so in the meantime, we've started Justified.
You started Justified.
Remains a joy. I mean, I've seen it all before, but my
thing.
Yeah.
I've not seen that.
There's a lovely the way they write language and the way it combines with the accent makes it creates a kind of music in the program. So they won't say something like, he's got a bad temper. They'll say he has a tendency towards ill temper.
Yeah.
There's a lovely use of language in the show that I find delightful. And Thomas also wanted to watch Invincible on Prime, which we've been enjoying. We've only got 2 episodes of that to go. And that's really good. Very, very gory and violent. But enormously, your Fiddle is correct. It is ridiculous, but very enjoyable.
What is Invincible? Sorry for the ignorant.
It's an animated series adapted from a comic book by Robert Kirkman, who wrote The Walking Dead, and it's a superhero show, and it's about a young superhero coming of age, and there's a version of the Justice League in it. Who I'll spoil up to the end of episode 1, if that's okay. Is that allowed?
Yeah, go on.
The version of the Justice League all get horribly murdered at the end of episode 1. And what we, the audience, know, but what our young hero doesn't, is that it was his father who killed them.
Nice.
His father is essentially their version of Superman. And we have no idea what's going on there. That's good.
Okay.
Enjoying that. And then last night I watched The Poseidon Adventure.
Oh.
And after this, I'm going to watch Beyond the Poseidon Adventure, even though I know it's terrible. I can't help myself.
And we had a bit of a retro Saturday because I watched Jaws yesterday.
Oh, fantastic.
Nice. Well, I have actually had a bit of a retro weekend because I had a couple of podcasts I was recording on Friday night and last night, both of which required me to watch movies. So on Friday night, I sat down and rewatched for, I don't know, I'm certainly comfortably in double figures now, John Carpenter's The Thing.
Oh.
Which was just as... It was as glorious as I remember it. I actually resented the fact that I was having to take notes for a podcast while watching it because I just wanted to watch it. Because it's just... It's one of those films where just absolutely everything is working and it's all working towards the same goal. Like there's no... You know what I mean? Like there's a unity of purpose with everything from the cinematography, the lighting, the sound design, obviously the acting, the performances, the script. It's all pulling in the same direction, and it's just... And the physical effects work are just... it's just... I mean, we were talking about it it was George and I talking about that one, and it's like, I actually can't think of a better movie for physical effects than The Thing. I think it's probably like... It could be the high tide mark of physical effects. And I know the guy went on to do, Total Recall and RoboCop, and obviously, a lot of my favourites in that field. I mean, he worked on Fight Club as well and Seven. I mean, he's an incredible artist. But I think The Thing does feel like a kind of magnum opus, I think, in a lot of ways. So that was fun. And then on Saturday night, I was watching On Her Majesty's Secret Service because my James Bond podcast has started up again, so I had to watch that. Yeah, yeah. Well, the thing is, I'm obsessed with the novels. I'm absolutely obsessed with the novels. I think they are simultaneously brilliant and horrible. I
went to Casino Royale, and just the coldness of it.
Yeah.
It's just incredible, and I don't think the film quite it doesn't capture that, I didn't think.
No, and Casino Royale's an odd one because Bond isn't quite Bond yet. I mean, Casino Royale really is an origin story because he doesn't really become Bond until the very end because of the events of what happened in that story.
Yeah.
But it's. I mean, I like Casino Royale, but he really comes into his own in the next sort of 3 or 4 after that in the novels for me. But no, but the thing about the movies is so. It's a couple. I mean, the people I'm doing that with so it's James Murphy's a guy who I'm writing my novel with at the moment, and Christine Kelly, who's a trans woman who's from Virginia, and she does a lot of pop culture analysis stuff. She's doing an amazing essay series at the moment about Tolkien. She's doing a kind of psychogeography of Tolkien's Middle Earth, which is just wonderful. She's an incredible talent, and we're really lucky to have her on the show. But it's quite kind of lefty. We're kind of looking at it we're kind of interrogating Bond, and the basic thesis of the podcast is the reason the Bond movies have value is because in any given year, James Bond represents the toxic masculinity's ideal view of itself in British culture in the year in which that film is made. And that, in that sense, the films have enormous value because they tell us about that version of Britain's view of itself. You know what I mean? So
I like that.
Yeah, that's kind of and don't get me wrong, we spend quite a lot of time taking the piss as well and just laughing and having fun because they are inherently ridiculous movies. But that's part of the fun is kind of that's kind of the thesis statement, I guess, for the series. And so it's been quite fun watching, because I've never watched the whole lot in order. I haven't even seen all of them, actually. This was my first time watching You Only Live Twice, which was last month's recording. So I haven't seen all of them, but I certainly haven't seen them in order. And having read the canon in order in the novels, I think it'll be quite a good exercise to see all the movies.
I think it's quite interesting as well, kind of that sort of the HIV era Bond, with Timothy Dalton. It felt very based, very almost sexless, and it'd be interesting to see where it's going now. With obviously Phoebe Waller-Bridge has written the script.
Yes,
part scripted it or something. I don't know.
She's script doctored. Yeah, she was brought in to script doctor, so she'll have had an influence for sure. Yeah.
So I'm curious about where it's going to end up.
And what Amazon are going to do with it now that they've got their hands on it.
That's true, yeah. Well, obviously, now that they bought the studio, it'll be James Bond versus RoboCop. That's the logical thing, because the universe hates me, so of course that's what's going to happen.
Why not James Bond versus Godzilla?
I don't know. Is Godzilla part of the MGM slate? I don't know. I guess maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, it should be.
It should be. That. Yeah, absolutely. It'd be a short movie, I think, probably, but incredibly enjoyable. It would have high rewatch value.
Did you hear that Universal are trying to get a Fast and Furious Jurassic World crossover off the ground?
I did see that, yeah.
Yeah. I want to see Dom attach a giant blade to the front of his Charger, jump off a hill and behead a T-Rex with a car.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that's just going to be like Fury Road, except they're being chased by stampeding dinosaurs for 2 hours. I think that's what it's actually going to be.
I do love a good dinosaur.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So yeah, that's been my movies and TV. I've been watching. I'm also rewatching Justified, planned through season 5 at the moment. That's what I'm watching with the missus. And the solo viewing is Sons of Anarchy. I'm determined to finish. I took a break on Sons of Anarchy for about 5 years. But I'm determined to finish it now just because it's kind of Stockholm Syndrome, really. I kind of want to know how it all ends beyond horribly, which I kind of knew from the end of the first episode. But I am enjoying that show. It's odd. It reminds me of 24 in that you have to accept that it exists in its own universe that has its own rules that aren't quite the same as our universe. The way law enforcement works, the way certain other aspects of it, you kind of have to accept that this is a parallel universe, California, where certain rules are different. But what I can't get past with the show, what I'm perpetually fascinated by, is the way it manages the relationships and the way it manages to continue to create these incredibly dynamic conflicts and shifting loyalties. And it just it's incredibly impressive the way it manages to have an awful lot of things happen, an awful lot of events that feel incredibly meaningful, and yet it maintains that kind of soap opera status quo actually quite a lot of the time, you know. But it doesn't maintain the status quo by having everything revert to the same at the end of the last episode. It does it by keeping everything spinning and bouncing off each other and interacting. It's just, I mean, I think, you know, The Shield did that quite a bit as well. The Shield's a good show for that, and Justified starts doing that in the sort of second, third season. You get more and more of that kind of storytelling. But Sons of Anarchy, and I also love about Sons of Anarchy that it's basically Hamlet in a motorcycle club. That's just that's just cool.
Yeah, that's all they need for the poster.
That's a great idea. I mean, that just is a great idea for a 7-season TV show, isn't it? And it's like, oh man, when it gets ugly, it really gets ugly, and I feel like I'm getting old because I really struggle with, you know, some of the violence, and especially there's some sexual violence stuff, and it's just like, oh god, it's really like, oh. But so it makes me feel bad, but I keep watching it anyway, because clearly there's something wrong with me. So what about reading, Priya? What have you been reading?
Do you know what? The last 12 months has been real fits and starts. I mean, I've actually read a lot of Friends in that work in the last 12 months.
Okay.
There's stuff that's kind of new to me. A guy called Benjamin Myers. I don't know if anyone's read The Gallows Pole.
No.
It's a book about the Cragvale coiners in Yorkshire in the 1700s. And I think it won I can't remember what the national prize for best historical novel was, but he's basically, these guys lived in Yorkshire, and it a lot of people were in the thrall of one very charismatic man who basically set up this coin clipping forging business, and trying to finance his local community. And it was on that tipping point, that time when, you know, just pre-industrialisation, and you know, there's a lot of aching rural poverty. His nature writing is just beautiful, absolutely beautiful. But there's a lot of cruelty in it as well, and kind of a touch of it almost sort of edges into folk horror in places. But these guys suddenly, you know, were having to answer to the law for what they're doing. You know, people get wind of what's going on, and it ends up in a murder, for which these guys were tried. But brilliant writing, fantastic writing. And I followed that up with another of his books called Bee Stings, which the last paragraph of just floored me in a way that I haven't been floored by a book in a long time. The imagery that it left me with was just awful. It's about a young girl who has been brought up in a children's home, you know, abused, sent out to work as a servant, and escapes with a child, takes a child and makes off across the fells. And she's trapped by a gamekeeper and a priest who's, you know, on marching powder the whole time, who's completely malevolent and awful. But yeah, great sort of great horror, but not quite, not Andrew Michael Hurley horror. It's very different, but yeah, interesting. But yeah, he was a bit of a highlight for me. Water Shall Refuse Them by Lucy McKnight Hardy. Read that last year and loved it. Piranesi. Don't know if either of you are fans of Susanna Clarke.
I am. I've got the book, but I've not yet read it.
Yeah, interesting. Different people sort of feel very differently about it.
Yeah, I've heard that.
The world is just beautifully imagined. You know, it's just wonderful. This kind of otherworldly house that's intricate and beautiful, and this man who's trapped there. And there's a mystery in that. There's kind of a whole story within that, but just the way that universe is realised is just wonderful. Wonderful. And Water Shall Refuse Them is set during the heat wave of, I think, was it 76?
It was, yeah.
Yeah, in Wales. And it's about this little community and a grief-stricken family who end up there. And again, it's very sort of folk horror, the idea that water refuses witches. So yeah, definitely would recommend that. That was superb.
Lucy McKnight Hardy, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
What about you guys?
What have you been reading, Scott?
It's okay to say it because he's not here, isn't he?
Yeah.
I've been reading a book by that darker bloke.
Yeah.
Because I shockingly stalled out of Numbers Game because of the school holidays, and it's taken me this long to pick it back up again, and I've raced to the end of that. So I can say nice things about it since he's not here. It's really good.
Yeah.
And beyond that, what was I? Today I was reading a screenplay for a never-produced Doctor Who movie from the early 90s, back before Amblin got their hands on it, written by Johnny Byrne, who wrote some episodes for the TV series. And it is so bad. It's so stunningly, shockingly awful. I mean, there's something about Johnny Byrne where he just completely fails to understand the tone of the show that he's actually written for. I mean, I know what'll go over really well with a family audience in a cinema. Let's have a running joke about how one of the Doctor's travelling companions owns a brothel. What? What, Johnny? What? So, yeah.
So was this an alien brothel?
Yes, and at some point someone says to the Doctor, doesn't he run a brothel? And the Doctor says, he should be so lucky. What? What, Doctor? What?
Okay.
It's quite a read. So that's what I was doing earlier today when I should have been doing.
Can I just ask why?
Oh, that's a good question.
We've been too polite to ask, RJ and I have been too polite to ask this entire time. But we've been thinking it.
Yeah. Scott, I've got no invested interest here, so I'm just going to say why.
That's a perfectly fair question. I suppose the honest answer is I'm an autistic and Doctor Who's my special interest. And so if someone sends me a screenplay for an unproduced thing of Doctor Who, of course I'm going to read it. I won't be able to help myself.
Are you a completist?
Golly, I mean,
with Doctor Who, that's a lifelong project. Is the problem, isn't it? Who completism is a tough one.
The answer is yes.
Right.
I'm sitting in a room with at least 300 Doctor Who books in it.
Right.
And that is not all of my collection. At some point I'm going to have to reclaim all the props and original scripts that I had that I sold 20 years ago.
Oh, bless you.
Yeah.
The pain was palpable.
Yeah, you can hear
deeply,
that.
Deeply.
Have you read Robert Sherman's
Dalek? I know Rob, yeah.
Yeah, because I've not yet, but I have to say I'm not. I kind of grew up with Doctor Who, but I haven't got the grand passion for it. It's not a bug that bit me, you know. But everyone who's read that said, "Oh, it's brilliant. You should read that."
Rob is an amazing writer. I mean, his recent short story collection, Stories We Tell Ourselves in the Dark, I think that was the title.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a masterpiece. I mean, the guy's a genius, and he's one of the nicest guys I know. And yeah, I mean, I'm slightly in awe of Rob.
Yeah, I think everyone is. I think when he at British Fantasy Con, when he read I Say from that collection,
yes,
I think pretty much the whole room was crying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a git, isn't he?
He is. He's so talented, and you can't even be annoyed with him because he's also so nice. It's infuriating.
One evening when you have a chance and when he's had a beer too many, ask him the story of writing that episode for Doctor Who. It is an epic saga.
Okay, that's interesting.
I mean, really, it was not a simple task for him.
No, I bet. I mean, it's funny you say that because the first time I met Rob was on a Doctor Who panel at FCon. It was my first FCon. And you know when they give you the form to fill out?
Mm-hmm.
And I swear, just as a goof, they always say, can you think of a panel? And I just said, yeah, why is Doctor Who the greatest idea for a television programme anyone's ever had? And I genuinely thought I was just being funny. Like, I just thought that's because I think Moffat said that. I think Moffat said it in an interview, like, he was asked, why do you think Doctor Who's been going for 50 years and it's still going? And he said, because it's the best idea for a TV programme anyone's ever had. And And then next thing I know, it's 4 months later and I'm sat there and Rob Shearer's sitting on one side. I've got Mark Morris sitting on the other side. And I'm wearing my kind of TARDIS Dark Side of the Moon bootleg t-shirt. Thinking like, what am I doing here? Why? How? And also why? And also how? But I did, I obviously chatted to Rob after, and I got him to sign my copy of Jubilee, and we got chatting. And I don't know if he considers me a friend. I certainly think of him as a friend. He's a wonderful man, and it's one of the things I've most missed about the con season is not seeing Rob. It's been a long time, and it'll be amazing to see him.
You can just bugger right off Kit. Yeah, right. Making me feel loved and included there. Yeah, with Miss Rob Sherman.
I do. Priya, I missed you so much I got you on this show, okay? I couldn't wait for FCon to talk to you, okay? It's not a competition, but if it is, you've won. Yeah. Okay, you've already. This is what winning feels like. Okay, this is you winning right now. So let's not do that. Come on now.
We are the prize.
yeah, we are the prize. There you go. Maybe don't enter the competition next time. I don't know what to tell you. So I've been reading. I'm still reading Tracy Fahey's "I Spit Myself Out." I'm finding that collection so kind of staggering and boggling that I'm having to dip into it literally a story at a time, dip out, read something else, come back. But I am still making progress with it and still being floored by it.
Hugely underrated, I think, Tracy.
I agree.
Hugely underrated. And her last collection, New Music for All Rituals, I thought was stunning. I thought it was really beautiful.
I haven't. Funnily enough, I haven't read that one yet. But I've the Unheimlich Maneuver it just floored me, and so far, as I say, I Spit Myself Out is having a similar impact. She's incredible.
I think as well, if you listen to a talk, if you ever get a chance to see her on a panel, I would. So, I mean, and you probably have, Kit. I would thoroughly recommend it. She's not only, she's very knowledgeable, hugely knowledgeable. Very clever person. Terrific writer.
Yeah.
In terms of short story collections, I'd also chuck in Steve Toe's Down in Dark Water.
Oh, okay. Yeah, all right.
Just really, really good. He's quite interesting. Quite a varied collection. Some feels very folk horror. There's some sci-fi in there. It's quite an interesting mix. It's very Undertow as well. The Canadian.
Yeah. Yeah, though he's been on my radar for a little while, so that's I appreciate that recommendation. That's really cool. Changing tack slightly, I've also read the last 2 weeks. I read Chuck Tingle's debut horror novella, Straight, which I will be reviewing shortly for Ginger Nuts of Horror. I may even be interviewing him for the site if I can get over my imposter syndrome enough to interview Chuck Tingle, because that feels like intimidating, but I guess I'll give it a go. But yeah, that's an interesting one, and it's I thought, you can all read the review at some point if you're really interested, but I did think it was pretty good. It's the core concept is great. It's this, all I'm doing is describing what's on the back of the book here, so this isn't really a spoiler, I don't think, but like the core conceit is there's been this cosmic event, and the impact of the cosmic event on the population of Earth is all the straight cisgender people are driven insane and try and murder all the LGBTQI plus people. But it only happens for one night a year. So they're driven completely insane for 24 hours, and then they go back to being who they were before with no memory of what they've done. And the genius of the story is it's set in year 3 rather than year 1. So it's been going on now, and it's become part of what people have to deal with. So it starts with our protagonist meeting up with a bunch of his friends, and they're all going off to a cabin in the woods to wait out, year 3's day, this anniversary event. But there's all this kind of stuff. So because it's the 3rd year of it, you've got all this structural stuff. Like there's literally the gay militia. So all of the LGBTQI plus members of the armed forces are out to provide security for the 24 hours this is happening, because they're the only people who aren't going to be driven crazy. So, and there's a vaccine, but it's not quite clear how effective it is, and also no one's quite sure how many people have taken it. So there's all these kind of interesting questions about trust and about, and about how people react to, that kind of situation. So it's really, I really, really enjoyed it. It's, I didn't have a clue what to expect because I don't know anything about Chuck Tingle beyond the covers, and the cover art and obviously the Hugo stuff, the kind of the controversy. But I was pleasantly surprised. It's it reads. It's a quick read. It's a slick read. There's no kind of. It's pretty straight ahead prose. It's pretty straight ahead pulp horror. But really, really cool concept. Really interesting core idea. So that was an unexpected delight and a real pleasure. And the non-fiction book I'm reading at the moment, which is at the other end of the spectrum, is Columbine by David Cullen, because I'm. My life in horror is coming to an end, and I know one of the columns I'm going to have to write is about Columbine, because it was one of those events that was completely seismic for me as a young man, and I need to kind of understand. I know that the version of events that we were sold in the first week turned out to be almost entirely wrong, but I don't know why. And this book is kind of the story of why. And it's written by a journalist who was there at the time. And I tell you what, I can't immediately recall a more devastating experience I've had than reading the introduction to this book, because there are 3 introductions, and the first one is the original 2010 edition. There's a second one for 2014, and another one for 2018. And every single one of them, of those introductions, he's talking about how things have escalated since the last book came out in terms of school shootings and in terms of these tragedies. And it's heartbreaking. Just the introduction is heartbreaking to read, Yeah.
It's tragic with something like that still is pertinent.
Yeah. Well, more pertinent, not less. I mean, that's the really scary part, is what's clear when you read the introductions is like, this is actually a situation that's still getting worse, and that's just, and from this guy as well. And he's very kind of, he's a journalist and he's writing in a very, particular mode, but it's very clear that this is very, very raw for this writer on a personal level. He's like because one of the things he talks about in the introductions repeatedly is the failures of the press. Like, we got this one badly wrong. We got it really badly wrong in how we covered it, and that's had really terrible consequences. And that's part of his thing. Like, that's why I've written this book, because I'm desperate to try and get the real story out there, But yeah, so that is, I've started that, and that's as heavy going as you'd expect. I mean, very, very well written. Really good piece of writing, but yeah.
And breathe.
I feel like I need a cigarette now after that, to be honest.
Yeah, I wasn't going to drink tonight, but maybe I will. I don't know. We'll see.
On a lighter note, I've really enjoyed, and the last book that I finished was Under Raven's Wing.
Oh, yes!
Yeah, have you read it?
Yeah. I reviewed it for Ginger Nuts. The review went up. I've actually interviewed Stephen about that. The part 1 went up last week. Part 2 is going up next week. I've done a spoiler-filled review for him. Interview with him, so you can check that out. And that goes up next week. Yeah, fantastic.
If anyone out there is a Poe fan, a Conan Doyle fan, yeah, superb. And what he does with it is, it's wonderful. It's unexpected. It's not a pastiche.
No.
It's a really and as well, the physical book is just beautiful. The way that PS have produced that is really nice.
Yeah, no, it's gorgeous. It's a gorgeous edition, isn't it? For me, the thing I was really excited about was just the way like 1870s Paris is like a character unto itself in the book.
Yeah,
it's just. Oh, it's so good. And I don't know about you, but whenever I'm reading Stephen, I've always thought part of me is enjoying the story, part of me is going like, how the hell did you do this? How did you get this stuff?
The encyclopedic knowledge that's there, and the references, and those are just the references that I got, and I'm sure there's a lot of them I didn't get.
Yeah.
But really beautiful, and I mean, it's a tour of Paris, from the top and the bottom. It's it's very, very cleverly done.
Yeah, no, I thoroughly enjoyed that, and also for me as well, it was the kind of, I felt that the contrast, because as it just by coincidence, I'm actually reading the Sherlock Holmes stuff at the moment, because I'm reading them with my kid for the bedtime story. She's really enjoying. Yeah, we're on the last book now. We finally started case books, so we've gone through the whole lot of short stories now, most of them, but. They're a delight to read out loud, but it's interesting. I think for me the contrast between Edwardian and then Victorian London and Paris is really striking. I mean, the class divisions are there, but there's something. The Paris version, it's got more of a kind of. There's more of a bubbling unease to it. There's more of a kind of dangerous quality to it. Somehow, I love how the ghost of the revolution is still kind of haunting Volk's version of Paris. I love all that. It's got a dangerous energy to it, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Which, of course, goes perfectly with the narratives because they're all kind of like, Sherlock Holmes walking around inside Poe stories. So it's really heavy and wild.
Yeah, and he does all the interesting stories as well, doesn't he? He does, Hunchback of Notre Dame, but it's not what you think it's going to be at all. So definitely would recommend that if there are fans out there.
I ordered it while you were talking.
Oh, brilliant. I'm not giving you money back, Scott, if you don't like it.
we had him on a few weeks ago, and everyone was raving about it then, and I forgot to order it, so thank you for reminding me.
Yeah, no, that was great. So I guess then we can talk about
texts. You said it reminded me of texts. I'm being RJ.
We'll come back to that. I want to know what people are working on.
Priya, make us feel bad by telling us you're writing something marvellous.
Yeah, I'm writing a 99 short story opus to read for Sherman. I wish I was, but I'm not. It's weird because obviously writing for me is I'm not really I haven't got prodigious output, so I am very slow. But this year is all about just a novella. If I can get a novella done, I'll be really, really happy. To sort of the quality that I want. But it's not going to be horror. This one, it's going to be it's kind of Greek myth, post-apocalypse.
Ooh,
kind of mashup. I don't want to. You see, I'm possibly the worst guest to have on because I'm one of those people that doesn't really like talk about an idea very much. Last year was a year where I published nothing, but I've got a lot of stuff in the pipeline that's coming out. I've got something in Mark Morris's unthemed anthology called The Beachfield Miracles, which is kind of the second coming in a northern town of a very impoverished post-Brexit Britain. So it's a little bit weird, kind of very quite religious. Not that I'm religious, but yeah. And then with John D. Taff for Nightfire, the tour imprint, there's a short story in that called Paparai. The collection's called Dark Stars. So I'm really excited about that as well. So that's quite nice. And unfortunately, the other couple of things that I've got coming haven't been announced yet.
Okay.
So unfortunately, one of them's a monster story based on a painting that I really, really love by oh my god, a painting I really, really love by oh my god, it's gone. What's his name? Bloody hell, William Blake. God, that was like pulling teeth, wasn't it? Oh yeah, it's 9:20. This is way too late for me. So yes, so that's kind of that. That's all I can talk about. Otherwise, I'd have to kill you all.
No, that's fair enough.
You too.
I have been failing to write anything for a couple of years now, and I've been trying to think about ways to get back into the swing of things. And this week I was invited to write a tie-in novella for a property that I've worked on before. And I'm still mulling it. Instinctively, I want to say yes, and I actually chased the opportunity initially, but my life has changed so much in the last few months. I don't know if I'm going to have time, and I'm terrified of accepting a gig and then not delivering. So I'm stuck in that awful situation where I have an opportunity in front of me that I really want to do, but I'm scared of it.
Do you think it's a realistic timescale? I mean, is it an aggressive timescale, or do you think it's deliverable?
Honestly,
or is that the question you can't answer?
I think honestly, at this point, any timescale seems scary to me.
Okay.
I've been out of the loop so long.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got the story. I know what the story would be. But it would require some historical research, and it would require me putting my arse on this chair every day for a couple of months and bashing out my words. And since the circumstances of my life changed so much 3 months ago, I just don't think I'm there yet. So that's the quandary that I'm staring down. I've got to make a decision by close of play tomorrow.
Wow.
So I don't know.
Okay. Well, I mean,
that's really, really hard, isn't it?
It's difficult, but as someone said in the chat earlier on, Scott does seem really invested in hurting himself. So maybe I should just take the gig.
Just say yes and make it so. Yeah, it is. No, but it is difficult. I respect that. That's a tough spot. I mean, best of luck, whatever you decide. I guess I'd have to say. But yeah, I have been. What the hell have I been working? I feel like I've been doing a lot. I'm really kind of. Yeah, I've really been doing a lot of multiple projects, which is why I can't now remember any of them. So I finished my monster story. Yay. And submitted that to the open call. I got it done a whole day ahead of the final deadline for submission and sent it in. And I am confident that it is the best version of that story that I could produce, and that's all you can ever ask for. So I'm quite happy about that. I'm now mulling over. There's an open call in July for there's an open call for splatterpunk anti-fascist stories, which I think, like, if I can't write something for that, I should probably just give up. So I'm mulling that over at the moment. I think my working title is Day of the Milkshake, but I haven't quite got the details worked out yet. But I'm letting my subconscious do the job on that, and I'll come back and hopefully that'll be pretty straightforward. I've written a few reviews. I've written a review of a crime novel, debut crime novel by a promising young writer by the name of R.J. Dark, and that'll be going up. No, I think he's quite good. I've got to say, this numbers game thing, I think it's going to be all right. I think it's going to do well.
It's amazing, and it's actually the second of his crime novels I've read.
Okay.
There's I shouldn't talk about it, should I? There's another one. He's good. There's another one. He's good at this crime thing.
Yeah, I think he is. Certainly this. I mean, I love the central pairing of Mal and Jackie. I just think, they're kind of insta classics, really. So he's really kind of nailed that. And I love how afterward he talks about how he came up with them, but that it's taken him 10 years to figure out how to write them. That makes you feel a little bit better. Selfishly, I was like, good. I'm glad it was hard because it's really good, and I'm glad it wasn't easy because that would have pissed me off. So I've written a review of that. I'm most of the way through my review of, as I was mentioning earlier, Chuck Tingle's new piece. The interviews with Stephen Volk, completed those. They come in at about 6,000 words. Mainly his, obviously, because he's the subject, but still, that's a lot of interview, and I'm really... the thing about Stephen is, as well as being a great writer, he's so... I mean, we witnessed this when he came on the show. He's just so extraordinarily generous when he's talking, when he's being interviewed. He's just so willing to really talk about process and really kind of dig in deep about where he got to in terms of, inspirations and what he was trying to do. I mean, I really kind of... As you might expect no spoilers for Raven's Wing, but obviously one of the things that the story is inevitably going to run up against are the politics of the time and contemporary politics when it comes to stuff like, Doyle and Holmes's and Poe's and Dupin's kind of, views on race and racism and stuff like that. And I was impressed by how Stephen handled it, but I also really wanted to kind of pick his brains about how he navigated that, because that's not a straightforward thing to deal with when you're writing about a historical period, but you're writing for a modern audience. And he just, I've asked him the question, he just went for it. He just really went through it and step by step and said, this is what I was thinking about. This is my decision-making process. And it's a real gift to have the access to someone's mind like that when they're as good a writer as Stephen. So that's been great. And I'm still working on the novel, the edits that came back, and we're burning through that. I think we're going to have I think we're going to have a draft to go back to the editor for the novel. Probably, I'd be amazed if we haven't got it done by the end of June, if not the middle of June. It's really rocking and rolling. So it's been good. I've been productive. Having slightly too much to do seems to agree with me. So,
well, since you raised it, Priya, what's your process? Do you work on a set schedule? Do you plan? Are you a pantser?
No set schedule at all. And do you know what? I've got really bad writing habits. So I wish I did. I really, really admire people who do that. I mean, I think I've just got to take the time where I can find it. And if it's a short amount of time, then that's used for sort of edits and drafting plans. I mean, I'm not someone who enjoys having a completely plotted A to Z piece to go at. I really like a lot of room to move because I think that's where I've got the interest. That's where the interesting happens for me and makes me enjoy the work. I mean, I'm obviously you've both written novels. I'm not a novelist, so obviously for shorter pieces, it's an easier thing. But I'll have the key points that I want to hit. Not always have an ending, but when I do, it's useful. I like to do a lot of reading and research around subjects. I like that whole process to sort of inform where I'm going. So yeah, I'm sort of between plotter and pantser, I think. I write longhand, especially in the early drafts. Yeah, wow. I always write longhand. So that sort of, it does slow me down, but I find it easy to think. And then when I move to typing it up, that's another round of editing right there. And I will rewrite a lot. I do a lot of rewriting. But remarkably, still haven't managed to hand in, stories with loads of typos in them. But yes, yeah, I do a lot of rewrites as well. It's getting better. I'm getting better at that. I think, some of my early short stories went through sort of 20 drafts.
Wow.
Really obsessively writing and rewriting till I was satisfied. But I think I've managed to shortcut that whole process. And it was quite interesting. I did a thing with Audible a couple of years ago, and that was a real lesson as well. We did. There was myself and Kat Ward and Laura Mara and a couple of other writers, and actually working with them on a story, quickly generating ideas and sort of mapping them out. That was a bit of a revelation as well. That made me rethink how I work up stories. So I'm getting quicker. And I think I've kind of like you, Scott. I do have the fear because for me, when I started writing was always I'd love to write a novel, but I do have the fear, very much so of that. So kind of I'm getting there slowly. I think kind of the novella process has helped me, a lot. But I'm pretty in awe of. I mean, you've written a couple of trilogies, haven't you?
I conned myself into it though. I couldn't. I had 6 or 7 novels I got to 20,000 words on and then abandoned. I just couldn't finish. So I basically went around begging people to commission me to write a book, so I'd have no excuse. And then somebody commissioned me, and then I had the fear, and I had to write it, otherwise I'd miss the deadline. So I don't know how much of a novelist I really am.
Well, I think your bibliography might beg to differ. And you've also been a playwright as well, which is really impressive. Have I imagined that?
Not really. I've done audio drama. I've written 4 audio plays. Audio plays for.
That's clearly a shabby second, isn't it, Scott? Sorry.
And I wrote 4 audio plays for Big Finish and 1 unproduced play, oddly, about an attempt to rescue Napoleon from Elba by submarine that some strange man commissioned me for and then never produced.
So actually, you've got a lot of work there under your belt, haven't you?
Yeah, oddly, yeah. But my episode guide to Dawson's Creek is still canonically my best work.
I mean, it's interesting you talking about the fear of the novel, because I mean, I have written a novel, and I'm currently working on my second, but the second that I'm working on is a co-production, and I'm not. Everything that I've written since the novel that I thought might end up being novel length turned out novella length. So I've certainly got a bit of a something about writing another novel. I'm not convinced, because I get asked every now and then, and people do say, "Have you got, when's your next novel coming out?" And it's like, it's not immediately clear to me where it's coming from. Because the one that I wrote was an idea I had when I was 19, or maybe even younger, maybe 18 or 19. That bad boy had been sitting in my head for 20 years by the time I sat down to write it. And it still took me 14 drafts, but I mean, when I say it was there, I mean, a lot of it, the characters, the 9 point of view characters that I knew were in the original conception, were going to get a chapter each, but I knew them, and I carried them around in my head for 20 years, and they arrived pretty much on the page as they were in my head. So it's a bit different to think about. But oddly, novella's not so much of a problem, because I got commissioned to write novella, and I did get that done comfortably in the time frame, and I didn't find that too challenging, even though that was a relatively new idea. So yeah, but there is something, I don't know, I think there is something intimidating about the novel, and I'm not sure what that is. And there's a feeling of like there's a feeling of like, okay, you've done it once, now do it again. Yeah, and it's like, I don't know, because I don't know how I did it the first time. So
when you do it the second time, it's not going to be the same novel.
Well, there's that as well. Yeah. Because that would be quicker. Oh dear. Yeah, process is weird. Writing's weird, let's be honest.
Yeah. I was going to say, the other thing, Scott, out of the stuff that you've done that's kind of in your trunk, is there anything there that you can use now?
Yes, there's a fantasy series I started to write, and I keep looping back to it and thinking I need to finish that. But at the same time, I did promise my agent a crime novel, which I got like 30,000 words into, and he's been very, very patient. He's been waiting for it for like 3-4 years now, and I just feel an obligation to finish that. So, but yes, there's a couple of things in the trunk. There's a comic book series I plotted back in the 90s that I think I'm going to write as a novel at some point. There's some stuff there I can salvage.
I was curious about if either of you work on multiple projects, because that's something that I've kind of has been a relatively recent discovery for me, is that I'm actually at my best when I'm jumping between fiction and non-fiction, and reviews and essays and fiction work, and that actually, for some reason, I do better when I'm running slightly too many projects. I just wondered if that's the case for either of you, or if you feel that you have to focus on one thing at a time.
Yeah, it's a hard no. I'm all about the single focus, getting into the flow. Right.
Yeah, I'm definitely with Scott on that. And because my process, I feel a little bit of I feel a bit fortunate in my process as though I'm a writer, but it takes me such a long time to write something. And occasionally I will be working up a couple of other things in note form, rough drafts, but I actually enjoy being really immersed in one thing.
Right.
I think that's when I feel most in touch with it.
I mean, that, if I may, that is the big advantage of the novel, is you do get to spend a really solid period of time in a specific place. So that is one of the attractions of it. So yeah.
Well, unlike R.J. Barker, who said he did, I'm reading what I think Alicia said in the thread, 70,000 words in a 70,000 word novel in a little over 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So, if I can bank 1,000 words in 2 weeks, yeah, I'm quite happy, really. So yeah, I mean, if I spend 3 or 4 months with a story, I also like then to be able to get on with the next short story. So I think my heart will always be with those longer short stories, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, and I also think, I mean, I think with all of us have talked about this before at different times, but there is part of me that says that kind of long short story / novelette / novella length is the ideal length for horror. I think,
Yeah.
I do think that sustaining a horror story over a novel length piece of writing is very challenging. So yeah, I think there's something to that as well, maybe.
Yeah, I think the one thing I do want to work up as a novel, maybe the year after next, if I can sort of get my shit together, it definitely isn't going to be horror.
Mm.
It'll be sort of dark fantasy, but it won't touch horror. I don't think.
That's interesting. I mean, I don't know. My line on that is always like, it's all horror, because life. I mean, have you been doing it lately? It's all horror. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, I mean, it is going to be dark. Yeah. Maybe some of it could be categorized as horror. Yeah. I don't know. I kind of don't think this is horror or this is sci-fi or this is fantasy when I write.
Right.
I don't even consider that. It doesn't really enter my head. I'm just writing what I want to write. It makes me feel sort of self-conscious.
That's interesting. Yeah. I most of the time I'm not writing to genre either. There is an exception to that where when I was writing A Song for the End, where I consciously sat down knowing I wanted to write a pulp horror novella. But that was part of, it's oddly though, that was almost part of the creative process, almost part of the kind of decision-making process. Like I'm in love with the pulp horror structure of, I always think of it, the first time I encountered it was in James Herbert's The Rats. It probably predates him even, but, opening chapter, meet a character, get a pen portrait life story over maybe 500 words, and then they get eaten by rats. And then you cut away and you meet the protagonist and they go through the first part of the day. And then you cut away and you meet someone else and you get maybe 1,000 words pen portrait this time, and then they get eaten by rats. And then and I love that structure. Something about it really speaks to me, and I think that's what I think of as a pulp horror structure, for a pulp horror novel or novella. And I knew that I wanted to use that in a story. I wanted to try and write one of those myself and see if I could do it. So it was certainly with A Song for the End, genre was very much in my mind. But that's the exception. I think it's the only time I've done that. Most of the time I'm just chasing rabbits, I'm just chasing ideas. And then afterwards, like, it's normally D2 or D3 where I'm looking at it going, okay, what is this all about exactly? What on earth were you trying to get at here?
And it's great because that's how I like to work. But the problem is, if you're writing for a brief, I can think of at least once where they said, we love it, but this isn't horror.
Right.
So, okay. Right, let's have another think about this. I'll write.
Yeah. No, that's fair. Hopefully the stories don't go to waste at that point anyway. They'll find a home eventually. But yeah, that can be an issue. It's thinking about that monster story I've just subbed. Actually, it's interesting because it's not. It is absolutely a monster story. It's absolutely not a horror story. And I know, like, I was conscious as I was writing it. Once I got the reader feedback as well, I thought the best chance I've got with this is if they're looking for something that is going to be tonally different. I might be in with a shout. They might decide they want it as a palate cleanser in between, because I'm imagining most of the stuff is going to skew horror that they're going to get, whereas this one it's not. And I just think, yeah, maybe it'll get in under the wire that way. And if not, I'll sell it somewhere else. It's fine. I'm not proud.
Right, text.
Yes, absolutely. Because we are past the hour now, and I do appreciate we've kept you. So. I apologise. Yes. So Priya, did we? I can't remember if I talked. Did I let you know about Urtext? Did I give you the pitch for this before?
Oh yes, you did. Apologies.
Fantastic. No.
Sorry, yes, I've forgotten about that. Yeah, sorry about that.
No, it's okay. So yeah, what is it? What's your Urtext? What's the one that did the number on you at the age that you needed to be who you were?
It's really hard actually, because I have a big list of things from childhood, but I think I'm going to have to say Watership Down. Is that funny?
It's not the first time Watership Down has been stated. It's quite, yeah.
Both the cartoon and then the novel, just because of the sheer brutality of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things that looked pitched at kids. And I just loved it.
Yeah.
Loved it. I loved the mythology of it. I loved the real drama of it. Yeah, so definitely I would say, because what year was it? Was it 78?
I don't know.
I don't know.
But I'm Googling frantically. The book came out in 72 and the film came out in 78.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, 78. So I would have been about 7 at that time.
Right.
So to sit and watch that, it was really quite something.
Yeah.
Quite affecting. And then when I read the book, which is just beautiful, yeah. So I would say that in terms of, yeah, because I obviously, at 5 or 6, animals are portrayed in a very particular way, aren't they, in fiction for children?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then
absolutely.
to encounter that to me, was just an immense moment. So yeah, that would be that.
Yeah. No, that's cool. It is funny. I mean, the other reason I was laughing because it is RJ's text. So the fact that he's not here is just perfect, really. And he'll never know because we'll never tell him. So that'd be great. Because the chat are well known for being able to keep their mouth shut, so I'm sure we'll be fine. What about an album? Out of interest, did you have an album?
Oh right. Oh sorry, I've got a track. But I think if I'm gonna say an album, I think The Sensual World by Kate Bush.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah, that's a solid.
Oh, no. Actually, I'm lying. I think The Hounds of Love for the B side, The Seventh Wave. That's going to be my album because the B side's kind of a whole conceptual thing. It's a whole story about a girl drowning.
Oh.
And to me, Kate Bush was always absolutely. She was an amazing storyteller in her work. Hello?
Yes.
Oh, you're still there. Sorry. Yeah,
Yeah,
amazing storyteller.
Kit, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, I think the bandwidth gremlins have struck.
That's not acceptable.
It's not.
We're talking to Priya. They need to get their act together.
We were getting Kate Bush facts.
I like how Doots translated the Morse code to send cake. That's...
I'm just going to type something in the text.
Okay. Yeah. We will try to get Priya back, everybody. Obviously. I guess while we're waiting for Priya, we could give our song choices as we're getting to that stage in the show. I don't know who wants to go first.
I'll go first. I've been listening to the Counting Crows' new EP, Butter Miracle, Sweet One, which contains an opening track called Tall Grass, which Adam Duritz wrote after spending some months alone at his friend's farm in Cornwall, and he's clearly gone native, and it's essentially Counting Crows does folk horror. And I never thought that was not in my bingo card for this year. Adam Duritz goes native and writes a Ben Wheatley film as a song. But when Counting Crows starts singing about blood upon the clover and dead rabbits staring up at the receding infinite English sky, you've got to think, wow, it's all got a little bit Wicker Man.
Nice. Nice.
But it's one of the best songs they've done.
Cool. Well, that sounds great. My song choice is, there's a podcast I listen to fairly regularly called the Scapegoat podcast, which is by a friend of mine, David Fagiani, and it's one of my favourite podcasts because it's literally him just babbling about stuff that he's really, really in love with, and that's it. There's no theme beyond it's a pop culture artifact, normally that he encounters as a teenager or in his 20s, that he's just wildly enthusiastic about. So there'll be TV shows, there'll be albums, there'll be all kinds of stuff. And full disclosure, I've been on the show a couple of times. I went on and talked about the UK House of Cards trilogy with him. We've covered House of Cards and To Play the King, and I'll be going back to cover the final cut at some point as well. Mm-hmm. But I mean, my appearances entirely aside, it's a really great show because the theme is enthusiasm, and I love hearing bright, articulate people talk about stuff they love. That's just a good time. And he has a rotating cast of guests. And 2 weeks ago, he released his first episode of the show that didn't feature him at all. It instead features his brother and one of his brother's long-term friends talking about System of a Down. and how much they love. Hey, yeah, you're back.
I don't know what happened there.
That's okay. Yeah, it's the gremlins. It's the broadband gremlins, but you're back, and that's the important thing. Summoning success. Yeah, you were summoned back. That's what happened. If you look in the chat, you can see the.
Right, did you do a spell?
Yeah. No, there it is. Look, the parrot of summoning.
I can see. Yeah, I can see the parrot.
That's it. Well, it worked. So.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, guys.
All the fabulous beasts. You see, we know what we're doing. We were just doing song choices while you'd disappeared. So this is out for the playlist. So Scott said something I've already forgotten. I wasn't really listening. Something about Counting Crows.
You know what? August and everything after. I loved that album.
Yeah, it's one of the great albums.
I played it to death when I was a student.
Yeah.
I think I saw Joe Hill talking about how like they should do the ultimate Crows gig, which would be like Counting Crows, Black Crows, and Sheryl Crow. Like that would just be awesome. That would be like Crow Fest, you know.
Sheryl Crow does sing backing vocals on a lot of Counting Crows albums.
Well, there you go. You
I did not know that.
Well. So anyway, I was telling an incredibly long-winded but obviously brilliant anecdote about a podcast I was listening to recently that talked about System of a Down, who are a band I haven't basically thought about for I haven't thought about since I saw them at Download 2 years ago, and they weren't very good. But listening to people talk about how much they were in love with this band reminded me of the brief period that I'd fallen in love with them in the early 2000s when Toxicity came out. And so my track for this fortnight for Writeopolis is System of a Down Prison Song, which is an absolute stunning piece of Armenian speed metal that everyone should have in their life,
wow.
in my opinion.
You've sold it.
But what about you, Priya?
Okay, my track would be, again, this changed every 5 minutes. It's going to be Cloud of Unknowing by Gorillaz. It's from the Fake Plastic Trees album, and it's got a lovely, lovely vocal by Bobby Womack. It's really beautiful, and there's strings and all kinds of things on it. It's just lovely.
Fair enough.
Awesome.
Sounds great. We'll make sure RJ adds it to the list when the slacker's back from holiday.
Yeah, how very daring.
So rude. Just so rude, honestly. I think it's just an excuse so that we have to invite you back on the show really, really soon so that you can speak to RJ. I think that's why he's done it. I think I think it was a cynical ploy that we're going to fall for, obviously. Priya, it's been an absolute delight. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on and chat to us tonight. I have missed talking to you, Priya. I really have. So this was
I missed you too. And it's lovely to meet Scott. And, everyone who's sort of tuned in as well. Hello, nice to meet you all. Lovely. You've really, I feel like I've had a really social weekend this weekend after the last 12 months. And this has just been a really nice way to spend a Sunday night. Oh, thank you, Fiddles. Fiddles just come hello. Katie, it's been wonderful. Katie, I hope your legs recover after your 11-kilometre hike or whatever madness you got up to today. It sounds like a busy day.
And if I may say, because Priya maybe won't do this, but you really do. You deserve to have Priya's work in your life. She is a phenomenal writer, and you really should go and get Fabulous Beasts, and you really should go and get Orm Shadow, and you really should read them both because they are absolutely stunning. They are stunning pieces of work. Priya's just one of the best writers working in speculative fiction today. We're incredibly lucky to have her and have her work. So please do go and check it out.
Kit, you're one of the biggest bullshitters I've ever met, but I love you. Thank you for your kind words.
I mean every single fucking word of that, Priya. Okay.
I think none of us, well, most of writers I know, none of us are very good at taking compliments. So I'll try and be gracious and say thank you. But at the same time, I've got a lot of work to do in terms of writing. A lot of things to learn, including how to write a novel. So Scott, send us some, some lessons, and you will get back on that horse. It will happen.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. I know it's been a dry spell, and it's a difficult period. But you're a writer in your bones. The fact you've had 6 novels out there, and
and the Dawson's Creek book,
And the Dawson's Creek book. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I fall before your greatness, Scott. I have not even seen Dawson's Creek, so or Dawson's Crack, as my partner likes to call it. It just passed us by. But yes.
Well, that's very kind of you. Thank you.
You're super charming and lovely, all of you.
Well, and on that slightly surreal bombshell, I think we'll call it an evening. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. We'll be back here in a fortnight. Maybe RJ will even deign to turn up next time. Who knows? There's only one way to find out. Come back in 2 weeks. Lovely.
Thanks again, Priya.
Take care, all, and thank you, Priya.
Bye, everyone.
Wonderful.
Bye, Kit. Bye, everyone. Bye.
Thanks for listening. Writeopolis records alternating Sundays via Discord. To take part in future shows, visit patreon.com/Writeopolis podcast to find our server details. You can also support the show there in return for Discord perks and early access. If you enjoyed the show, please like, subscribe, and spread the word. Thanks again. Writeopolis, we're not just gonna kid it. Writeopolis, we're not just gonna kid, yeah.